Known in the social sciences as the school-to-prison pipeline, this trend is the result of a systematic failure to address the academic and social needs of vulnerable youth. The result is the mass incarceration and undereducation or miseducation of entire communities of American students. Any reasonable introduction to the social justice issues in America needs to investigate the key factors which contribute to the funneling of children out of public schools and into jails and prisons. The school-to-prison pipeline can be understood as the collection of practices that incrementally favor the criminalization of students and the social fallout of these practices on communities. Here are 5 facts to face as we begin to understand the anatomy of this disturbing trend. 1. Disciplinary policies in schools are often the first step. Zero-tolerance disciplinary policies in schools enforce severe consequences on students, often without regard to the severity of the infraction. This distorts the disciplinary system and establishes a foundation for labeling students as criminals for extremely minor issues, such as throwing an eraser or breaking a pencil.
We're here, laddie. Mysterious scribblings? A secret code? No. Poems, no less. Poems, everybody! The laddie reckons himself a poet. Money, get back. I'm all right, Jack. Keep your hands off my stack.
These so-called zero-tolerance approaches going too far.
You have police actually coming in and investigating and sometimes taking kids down to the police station, grade school children, for what we used to call childish behavior.
A complete overreaction. That statement tonight from New York City's Department of Education over the treatment of a 12-year-old student. She was hauled out of class in handcuffs by police for doodling "I love my friends" on her desk.
Yesterday, the school notified my wife that my son had brought a toy gun to school and that he was facing possible suspension. And I remembered like the toy my son was playing with in the morning. And I said, it can't be the same gun he's talking about.
We don't need no education.
Here's a principal body slamming a student. He physically picks him up and body slams him. This is a 15-year-old boy. They need to assert themselves.
2. Schools have become increasingly overzealous in their arrest making. Since 2001, there's been a steady increase in school-based arrests, expulsions, and suspensions. Being suspended from a school can set into motion a direct route for students to drop out, and in some states, students even lose all rights to attend school again.
25 middle school students were arrested, hauled off to jail after the food started flying in the cafeteria last week. A zero tolerance run amok? Here's Barbara Pinto.
This was Cassandra and Aaliyah Russell's first day back at school. The sisters, both in 8th grade, were suspended for taking part in a food fight in the school cafeteria. That's not all.
I actually got arrested. Handcuffs on.
Who does that? Lock children up for throwing a carrot, a biscuit, milk, Jell-O. Who does that?
Police rounded up more than 24 students, 11 to 15-year-olds, now charged as criminals with misdemeanor reckless conduct.
I never thought I could be arrested for a food fight.
They're worried about this being on their record, a food fight. I just can't get over that.
3. Standardized testing has become a breeding ground for unfair practices. The rise of high-stakes testing has put pressure on schools to push out low-performing students. As a result of test-based accountability regimes, which can often determine how much funding schools receive, schools are more likely to push out low-performing students in an effort to boost average test scores.
Simple question. Can a child read at grade level? And in order to determine that, that's why you measure. And if the answer is yes, we all say great. If the answer is no, they ask the question of it, then what are you going to do about it? And so the principle behind the No Child Left Behind Act is to set high standards, believe every child can learn, and measure to see if we're getting results.
4. The juvenile justice system is not focused on rehabilitation. Once students enter the juvenile justice system, their academic futures become less viable. Once involved in the system, a majority of students will never graduate high school. Having a criminal record, even a minor one, can set the stage for students to be denied financial funding for future schooling. 5. Minorities and those with learning disabilities are most at risk for becoming part of the schools to prison pipeline. This pipeline operates across all levels of U.S. government programs, starting with school districts and bleeding out into city programs, state programs, and federal programs. At all levels, students of color are disproportionately represented. The phenomenon is known as disproportionate minority confinement. Additional risk factors for a passport to the school-to-prison pipeline is having an academic or emotional need that goes unsupported. Therefore, minority students with learning disabilities or emotional issues are the most represented demographic on the pipeline. The reform of foster care system, the youth drug treatment centers, the residential group homes, and the alternate private and public schools of America is called for in order to resist the pipeline. This is not just a social justice issue, it's a human rights issue.
Kids who are much better than other kids at the same age in different disciplines, or at different times of the day, or better in smaller groups than in large groups, or sometimes they want to be on their own. If you're interested in the model of learning, you don't start from this production line mentality. It's essentially about conformity, and increasingly it's about that as you look at the growth of standardized testing and standardized curricula. And it's about standardization. I believe we've got to go in the exact opposite direction. That's what I mean about changing the paradigm.
Here's what I'll do as president. I'll immediately implement country of origin labeling because Americans should know where their food comes from. We'll let folks know whether their food has been genetically modified because Americans should know what they're buying.